Oh, we're doing good.
Yeah,
We're slowly going live.
great. Yeah, I just got the notification there. Yeah. So
All
apparently
right.
we're live on Facebook, I believe.
Live on Facebook.
Hello, Facebook.
Hello, everyone. I'm here with Dave Bainbridge. How's your name, right? Tongue-tied a little bit.
Hey, Ron. So, yeah, I was just looking and it looked like the first time we were in contact was like something like 2004. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, when I sent you my first solo album, Vale of Gossamer.
that's right. I remember, and like I was telling you off camera, I
Mm.
reviewed I reviewed that on Halloween of 2004.
Oh, right. Excellent.
I
Yeah.
mean, uh, that
Mm.
was towards the beginning of when I started. I was like 3 years into doing reviews. I didn't wasn't getting that many at that time because new to doing it, and
Yeah.
I had heard of you up
Mm.
until that point, but it was kind of neat. Okay, here I think you were one of the first ones that sent me. It was outside of the United States. I mean, I was getting
Ah,
ones
right.
from one of the very first ones.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I think, and then I think I sent you some Iona CDs at some point as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
you
previous.
sent me 2 years later. You sent me the live DVD,
Oh, wow.
uh,
Yes. Yeah.
and then the Circling Hour. That's the
Ah,
same year in 2006, and then from the Silence with Troy Donockley. Is that how you
Donockley.
pronounce
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Troy Donockley from
Yeah,
Silence.
that
Yeah.
and at that point, all I knew of you and him were that you were part of Iona, and I had seen one or two of your CDs in a local shop in uh, in Southern California where I'm from,
Ah,
and I
okay.
was like, okay, and it would they they put it in the New Age section.
Oh, yes.
I
Yeah, I think
think
it was always quite difficult to know where to find Iona albums because people weren't quite sure how to categorize it. So yeah, I mean, sometimes it'd be in the gospel music section or the new age or the rock or the folk. Yeah, but
yeah,
there were lots of elements of all of those kind of things, strands in the music. But it made it hard for people to know where to look sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah.
In the early some of the record shops in Los Angeles area, in particular one in Pasadena called Cuba. Now, Cuba used to have the most uh, imports that I've seen outside of the Hollywood store.
Mm.
And that's where I saw. I don't remember which one it was, but this was probably in the late '90s. I want to say mid to late '90s, somewhere in that area. Maybe if I remember correctly, wasn't the first one around mid '90s, 94, 95,
The
somewhere?
first Iona album came out in 1990, but yeah,
Okay,
from 1990 to 2000, we had a US record label who were distributing our albums. So yeah, anytime in that period, you might have seen Iona albums in various locations around the US. And
this year,
actually, the US was actually our biggest fan base, even though we didn't actually really well, we didn't play in America until the band had been together for 5 years, and then that was only one gig, and then our first tour was like 1996. So we'd been together for 7 years, um, but for some reason the music had always appealed to the American audience. And I think it's partly because of the kind of Irish and Scottish influences, and people from, whose roots are in the British Isles really connected with the style of music and the message of the music.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, for me, maybe if I go further back, probably, but on my father's side, it's Germanic. So maybe they went up north. I have never had a chance to dive deeper into where exactly the origin area is, but I've always been interested in that kind of music because for me it's always been soothing, on an earthly way.
Yes, yeah. When we started Iona, the band, we were writing music. Well, kind of had two strands to it. One was writing about the amazing landscapes, because Iona is this small island off the west coast of Scotland, and it's very beautiful, an amazing place. And another island that was very close to myself and David Fitzgerald, who were the co-founders of the band, Lindisfarne, off the east coast of England, close to Scotland. And so the music we were writing was kind of imbued with this sense of the atmosphere of these places, but also lots of stories dating back, over like 1500 years of the early Celtic Christian saints like Columba and Aidan, and these amazing stories of kind of miracles and angelic encounters and that. So there's some deep roots within the music, and I think, and that's something I've always loved about Irish music in particular, because you get this sense of history when you listen to it, traditional Irish music, but not just traditional, but contemporary music from places like Ireland. There's something that feels like it connects you to an earlier period, and I've always liked that idea of music connecting to past times in some way.
Yeah,
and because journey as well, sense of journeying through the years.
Yeah, that's what I noticed too. It's like you can close your eyes to the music, and then you could transport it to places, of this, whatever this subject of the song or the whole album. If it's a full concept album, you could just get transported to that land, or back to old times before technology.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I mean, we like when I was writing pieces for Iona about events that had happened like in the 4th or 5th, 6th century, we've no idea what music sounded like then, because there's no record of like Celtic monks. We know that they chanted music, and Columba was a great poet and wrote about some fantastic poems about nature, but as far as kind of the actual musical notes, we've no idea how it sounded. So it's quite interesting to try and kind of imagine that, and find some kind of connection. So I think all of since I left music college, I've always been more interested in writing music than actually playing it as a kind of soloist. I've always felt that composition's my main calling, and that sense of creating a journey. Because when I was like 13 and 14, and even younger, I was listening to albums by Yes and Genesis, all the big names in rock music. And what I loved about that music was it took you on a journey, and it wasn't kind of restricted by the forms of the pop music of the day, where you'd have verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, repeated. You had long form compositions that were more like the classical music that I was also listening to as a kid, when I was having classical piano lessons. So I've always liked that idea that a piece of music should take you to a different place, and you'd be absorbed in it, and it would be like a journey. So basically, all my albums, I think, since then have had that kind of idea in mind, including the new one, To the Faraway.
Right. Well, uh, progressive rock, especially, you have that freedom to just, you can write about anything, whether it's a real place or made up place, you can, and you're not constrained, to only writing 2 or 3 minute long songs. If it needed to be longer, it could be longer. But I think as long as it's not forced to be long, it's like, where you think that, oh, if I don't have a long song, I might lose my credential.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you don't write long songs just for the sake of it, but for
Right.
me, I mean, I've always loved classical composers like Mahler, Gustav Mahler, and from England, Vaughan Williams, and the way that classical composers developed themes, just like fragments of melody, and changed them and changed harmonies with them, and maybe stretched them out or made them the same notes shorter or transposed them into different keys, all that kind of thing. I've always loved in classical music. So I've tried to use those same concepts, within the music I write, and also you can hear it in pieces by Yes and people like that. This classical approach where you're developing melodies. You kind of state a melody at the beginning, perhaps, and then it takes you on its own kind of journey through the harmonies that you create around it, or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I got a few people in the chat room.
Excellent. Hello, people in the chat room. Oh, Cheryl. Hi, Cheryl.
Nick Fletcher.
Oh, Nick. Yeah, Nick is a big friend. We were in a band together after we both left college, called Plan B, which was our attempt at. Nick's a fantastic guitarist, by the way, I should say. And Plan B was our attempt at creating a progressive band in the early '80s. But we did about a year's worth of rehearsals, and then tried to get gigs, and no one was interested in that kind of music then, because we just had the whole punk thing, and then people were really interested in electro pop at the time. So that was kind of that disbanded, but actually became a template for Iona in some ways, because we were writing long instrumental passages, and there were female vocals, courtesy of my sister, in that. And I've just been recording some keyboard tracks for Nick's new album, The Cloud of Unknowing, which is going to be a really great jazz fusion album. So hi, Nick.
And then, of course, your wife's in there.
Oh, great. Yes, Sharon. Yep. Hi, Sharon. Yeah, she's also just in the kitchen.
Oh.
So then, you can actually hear me in actual. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. Great.
And then Robert Schindler.
Oh, Robert. Yes. Yeah. Hi, Robert. Good to see you. Yeah. Robert's a fantastic keyboard player. With the man with the most keyboards that I know, I think.
Oh, so, yeah. When I spoke with him, I was like, he was right in his room and completely surrounded.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not quite sure how he gets in or out of that space, actually.
He might have like a trap door or something.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent.
So yeah, I had those ones, and then for some reason I kind of lost track of you until I got a few years back on to Facebook.
Yes.
And Facebook to some could be a curse, but to me it's a blessing, because you get the community of the prog community together, and it's like, everybody is so friendly. In comparison to other musicians, they're usually more standoffish. It's like, like I'm royalty, you're a peasant, leave me alone type of a thing. But
Yes, yeah,
with prog musicians, it's like at the different festivals that I've been to, you can easily walk up to them, and it's as if they're actual friends rather than two
yeah.
two
Well, I think
different.
yeah. I mean, the like when I used to go to concerts when I was a teenager in the 70s, we'd sometimes sneak off school and try to get to the venue early so we could kind of find a back door to go into the theatre and watch the sound check or something. Which I did actually with my friends. I think we snuck into a Pink Floyd sound check once and Wishbone Ash and that. But you never really got to meet your heroes in those days. And I think there was like this, they were part of these big record companies, and communication with fans was kind of, they kept it as like a mysterious thing, trying to keep the artists in this kind of mysterious place and create that mystique. But since the big record companies all kind of collapsed, or most of them, because of like streaming and downloading, and so most musicians have, like particularly in the progressive arena now, are independent, either have their own labels or with small independent companies. So communication, we gradually realized that communication with people who buy the albums is really vital, to our survival, and also to letting people know about the music, because there isn't this big machine of publicity now that most artists, we just don't have that anymore. And but with Iona, I've realized from the beginning that communication with people who like the music was really vital. So going right back to the beginning of the band in like 89, 90, I used to put together a newsletter, just like a photocopied thing. And it was literally cutting and pasting in those days, take photos and going to a local print shop and asking them to assemble all these bits. And then we'd send out physical copies of the newsletter. And we created quite a community. It probably wasn't big, it was maybe 400 or 500 people. And then gradually that migrated as the internet started over to, digital copies of a newsletter. And really now a lot of those people who were fans of Iona and then my music, as I released solo albums, you kind of become friends and almost like family over the years. And that's just been so brilliant to see. And in the last days of Iona, when we played live, quite often fans from the early years would bring their children to see us, and they'd become fans as well. So it was a nice, very organic kind of progression, really. And I love it, interacting with people on Facebook and email and things like this. Because music's much, it's something that brings people together. It should bring people together as a community and connect us in a shared experience. Of something that is more than physical. It kind of, brings in, connects us to our spiritual side as well, and much more. So, although we've seen kind of record sales slump compared to what they were. I mean, Iona, we used to sell, I think Journey into the Morn sold close to 100,000 copies, but so now it's a fraction of that. But actually we're earning more because we're selling the albums ourselves. And also it feels much more like the people who buy the albums are really kind of precious to us, because they've followed the band and they support what we do, and with crowdfunding campaigns and stuff. So it feels it's a very kind of honored position, really, to be able to still produce music and have that connection with people.
Now, you mentioned earlier about the streaming. I have now seen two different sides of what that's all about. I've noticed that there's some artists that are complaining about it because they're not making enough, and then others aren't. And so it's like for someone like myself, it's like I'm on the fence as to which is, I obviously I care more about what the artist thinks rather than, sites
Yeah.
like Spotify, because it's more important because if, obviously, I buy physical media, streaming, I think honestly, it shouldn't be your main source of how you get your music as the audience.
Yeah.
I really think you should buy it. If you can't buy it on CD, you buy it the digital copy, because you're supporting the band. You're basically telling the band or the artist, I like your music, I want you to do more, so I'm buying your new latest CD. And I find sometimes, especially when I can afford it, if I buy someone's new CD and I don't have something from their past, I like to gather up some of that, so at least that I can see the journey of that artist, from their beginnings up until the current time, just to see how well they've progressed.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think you and me both come from a time where, as I can see from behind you, that an album is more than the music, but it's the whole experience of having the physical copy in your hands and looking at the artwork while you listen to the music and reading the credits. And it was like when I was young, buying an album, I had to save up to buy an album, which might be a week or two of pocket money or doing odd jobs. And so it was a big occasion, and music seemed to hold more value then because of that. Now music's so widely available that it's kind of the value of it, physical value of it, has been lost in a way. Although I love YouTube. I love discovering new artists and finding old like TV performances of bands that I used to love that I'd never seen before, all that kind of thing. And the problem with Spotify obviously is that as a means to make money for musicians, it just doesn't work. The CEO of Spotify is a billionaire. The musicians, apart from like maybe 0.5% of the top people who sell millions of streams, the rest of us virtually get nothing from that. Right. I just had a royalty statement the other day, and there's pages and pages of streaming, my songs that have been streamed, and the whole lot came to like 37p or something, 37 pence. That's like 25 cents or something. Right. But I think the band I'm in, Lifesigns, John Young, who's the founder of that band, has the best attitude towards Spotify, in that if we can use it as a means of publicizing the music and not putting whole songs on there, but just putting part of songs, and then point people to the artists' websites where they can buy physical copies or buy download copies, but from us, then using it in that way is it kind of is the best option, and also to retain the value of the music as well.
I think our generation understands that, but
exactly, yes.
I don't think the younger generation, I think because it's so readily available, they don't understand that the music that doesn't appear out of nowhere.
Exactly.
The musicians, whether they play organic instruments or all synthesizers, everything, it doesn't matter. It costs money for them to get those instruments, and then cost them time, which equals money to create their song. And then they put it out, and then they're not getting any, they're not getting anything. And in order for them to get any kind of money, they have to do millions and millions of streams. It's like, it's a difficult thing. I hate to say it, it's almost some way kind of like a popularity contest, and some people, I mean, granted, some people get up there, some of the, more independent bands, some bands that I've seen have not reached million streams, but to get there, it's like, you have to kind of be a little lucky in a way.
Yeah. I was talking to my friend Nigel Palmer, who is a mastering engineer, and he mastered my new album. And he was saying he just mastered an album by, I think it's a classical cellist, and she's really popular. She had something like 11 million or 100 million streams of her album, and still hardly made any money from it, like maybe £1,000 or something. It's just, the figures just don't add up. But yeah, like you say, I mean, I've actually sold quite a few physical CDs to the Faraway, the new album, and I think it's largely to people who, from our generation, who understand the value of a physical product. But also Rob Ailing, who's my friend from our distributors, Gonzo Multimedia, I think realizes that there's still kind of a market for really good physical product that gives you a value other than just the music. So with my new album, there's also like a box set version of with a hardback book of photographs that I'd taken during lockdown, which all relate to the music. So we've got like I've got it over here. I can show you. Hang on a minute. Yeah. So this is like a full color book that comes with the box set version, which is in fact almost sold out, and kind of comes with lots of the photos I've taken.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So and we also did the same thing with an Iona box set that we did last year, 17 CD box set called the Book of Iona, with the idea being to not just to present a reissue of the original studio albums, but to have a companion album of various demos and unreleased tracks with each album, new artwork, full color A4 size booklet. And so you really feel, although it's quite expensive to produce and to buy, it really feels like there's a real lasting substance in those kind of physical products, dating back to the days when you had gatefold sleeves and that with albums.
Oh yeah.
So, so that's one way I think artists can regain value in the products and back catalogue and things. But yes, so I mean, I remember having a conversation with my daughter when she was about 12 because she used to stream music for free from the internet, and I'd be hard at work working in my studio making albums, and she'd be streaming music for free of all of her favorite bands. But when she understood the connection between the fact that music needs to generate money for the artists in order for them to make the next album, and she understood that then and started buying albums, which is really good. And I think people need to kind of see that connection again in order for music to have a future, really, as far as sustaining composers and musicians.
Right. Yeah. It's like a few months back, I did have a streaming versus physical / digital media. And, I'm on the fence. Sometimes sometimes I like the idea of the streaming as a companion to the physical media, where it's like you own it, and then you paid the artist the money for the CD or album, and then when you do streaming, it's like this is like getting a little extra, on the side type of a thing, so it's like that's how I would look at it. I've used like YouTube, when someone on Facebook tells me of a band that I've never heard of before.
Yes.
I go and investigate it. And if it's something that I truly like, I go and seek it out to buy it so I have it, because when they put albums on YouTube, they don't put like the individual tracks. They just put they upload the whole album. So it's like you can't really figure out where one song ends,
Yes.
Unless someone does the little timestamp, but very few people do that because that's kind of time consuming. They just want to upload this thing, and it's nice to listen to.
Yeah, for me as well, the order of the tracks on an album is very important because I spend a long time just thinking of what order to put all my tracks on an album in, so that you have that sense of journey through the music. If you're just downloading one track or one or two tracks, and you don't get that sense of the whole thing, I think that's you're missing out there.
That's the whole album experience, It's like
exactly.
I take, whenever I get something new in, I make sure I take the time to listen to it, listen to it all the way through, and then of course, I put music onto, the thumb drive because my car has a USB thing, because it's a pain to carry like 10 or so CDs with you. So it's like it's a convenience, which I kind of think in a way that streaming thing could be a convenience, not the end all thing, but it's like it's just something convenient, just the same way as people stream movies,
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the convenience. I think as long as I'm not against streaming, but I think the financial model is wrong, and it needs people other than kind of entrepreneurs who are, just out for making lots of money for themselves to be in charge of the streaming. I mean, if there was like, we talked with Lifesigns actually and John Young about maybe setting up our own streaming service at some point. I don't know how practical that is, but if there was an alternative to Spotify where the streaming was providing actual, some income rather than like 0.000 of a pence kind of thing,
right,
then that could make the whole thing sustainable. I love the fact that people buy downloads of my album, because we make the downloads like for the new album To the Faraway are a 24-bit, which is actually better than CD quality. It's actually the same files that that I mix on my computer. So I'm all for getting the highest quality. But also, if there's, we with the download version, I also provide all the artwork files, so people can see that on their screen as they would if they had the physical CD, so that you can experience the whole kind of thing with the looking at the credits and the artwork simultaneously.
Oh yeah, that's kind of, for me, the one thing I haven't gone into buying digital is because I miss the idea of holding something. I mean, that's great that to put those the credits and the artwork up onto a website for people to look at while they listen to their digital copy. That I don't know how many people do that, so it's like, you would have to, I don't know, it's like, again, it's like the physical, I mean, even though on CDs, it's, the print is quite small, so,
Mm.
you know, I wish I had the space in my place to house full records, because then I can really get into that whole
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's things are probably going to change in the coming years as well, because like CD dual cases and and vinyl and that, they're all like products of the oil industry. So as we're going to try and combat climate change and not use fossil fuels to manufacture things, there are going to need to be alternatives to either what music is made out of, or as you say, having it in some kind of digital format. But still, hopefully it'll be a physical product still for people to be able to look at. And it's difficult to know how it's going to pan out in years to come. But
Well, the one thing with the digital format that is, you don't have a time constraint that you do on a single CD. Was it 79 minutes?
yeah, yeah.
If you wanted to do a grand office of like, I heard somewhere out there, the longest recorded modern recording is 33 hours.
Yeah.
Some odd music, I like to quote it because I don't know exact, I haven't heard it, and I'm not sure if I want to sit through 33 hours,
No.
three maybe, but not 33. That's it.
Yes, that's true. I mean, there's something to be said about having time constraints, because it helps you to, it forces you to be more concise in what you're writing. I mean, I know a lot of artists still try and make their CDs the length that a vinyl album would have been, because they think people are used to listening to that length of album. Certainly for me, within the new album is like 71 minutes, so it's kind of like a double vinyl length, really.
Right.
But I think at least even with the CD constraints of a CD, it kind of, you have to. I mean, I had more material than would have fit on the one CD, so it forced me to have make decisions as to what to put on the album and what to leave off, and that's always a positive thing, I think. If you have no constraints at all, you can just carry on forever and not finish anything.
Right. Well, for progressive music, I can see the bands wanting to fill up the full CD, but for a rock band, you usually, or pop bands, you want to keep it more concise, like 45 minutes. For some of their audience, that's all that they can handle at one sitting.
Yeah, different styles of music.
Right. I mean, what they have, not to frown on them, but they tend to have a shorter attention span, whereas progressive fans tend to, their mind is a little more open to pieces that go a little lengthy, and they can sit there and not like look at their watch like, okay, when is this over?
Yeah.
Although I've in the past, especially in the 90s, there was a lot of bands that they feel like if they don't make something over 10 minutes, that they're gonna, like I said earlier, they're gonna lose their prog credentials. And then so they force themselves, or they add songs together to make something bigger, and songs that really don't, match up with each other. But they think, oh, well, it's progressive rock, so if it changes, Yeah, but it
Yeah,
has to
yeah,
change within a flow of things, and not
yeah. That's down to good composition, really. If you're
right.
like, I was in my early years learned all about different classical forms of composition. Um, so I kind of had at least a vague understanding of how you could develop pieces in different ways. And a few of my early pieces were uh, more in the classical genre, piano and stuff like that. But yeah, I think like I've heard tracks on some of the free CDs you get with some of the prog magazines. And there's like the intro lasts for 5 minutes and before anything really happens. Although the playing might be great, there's been no thought as to really how to develop the composition. And a few years ago I did a recording with a friend of mine who's a fantastic pop music writer. He's written several hits for various artists. And it was fascinating working with him because he wanted me to do some playing on this track that was going to become a single. And he, like, literally every note I played, he was kind of analyzing to see whether it was necessary. And I thought that was a really great discipline because sometimes we, in the progressive genre, kind of we play loads of stuff and it all sticks there. But because you've only got like 2 or 3 minutes, or 3 minutes in a pop song, 3.5 at the most. Literally every passage, he was kind of analyzing it and saying, is this necessary? Does it enhance the song? Do we get to the chorus quickly enough and all that? And that was great because I realized that that was a very important aspect. And whether you're writing a piece that's 3 minutes long or 15 minutes long, it's always good to consider whether what you put into it is actually has a function within the piece. If it's just like, it can easily stick different kind of ideas together and it kind of works. But if one of them's not actually taking you to the next stage in the composition, it's, you have to think about whether it should be there or not. So,
right. Well, I've heard songs, in the prog genre that are 2.5 minutes that are more interesting and have a lot of time changes than some that are, let's say, 20 minutes. That they seem to be just drawn on, just again for that. I think I call it the prog credential. That you got to make this, or else your band. I even saw on Facebook for band Flower Kings, their new one. Some of the fans are complaining that there's no epics, nothing over 10 minutes. And I'm like, why does that matter?
Yeah, that's true.
Why does it matter? I said, if you like the band, you like the music, doesn't matter if it's a 2-minute song or a 30-minute song, doesn't matter. And that shouldn't be the reason why you're listening to the band or the artist based on the length of the song.
No. I've been playing keyboards with the Straubs for like six years, and like some of the Straubs music is quite epic and long, but Dave Cousins is a really masterful songwriter, and one of my favorite Straubs pieces is a song called So Close and Yet So Far Away, and I think it's like 2.5 minutes long, 3 minutes at the most, and it's just such an amazing song because like literally every note in it has to be there for a reason. It's there for a reason, and there's just subtle chord changes, and it's a wonderful song, and it says as much in that 2.5, 3 minutes as much longer songs because it's so well constructed. So that's the key, is whether a song's long or not, just to have every part of it have a function within the piece.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere too. Is it Dave retiring from performing or something?
So, sorry, you cut out.
Isn't Dave? I saw that he's either retiring from recording or
Oh,
retiring from performing.
yeah, live performance. Yeah, yeah. He's had some health issues over the last year, so yeah, he's decided to not go ahead with any more live performances, certainly for the foreseeable future. Yeah, because his health definitely comes first. Yeah, which is sad actually. We were going to be doing Straub's electric band tour in June in England, COVID allowing, of course. But yeah, so he's going to be stepping back from that, but still writing songs. So hopefully there'll be another Straub's album, at some point, because he'll have the time to focus on that. So,
Right. Now, how did you? I mean, I've spoke with you and your wife during some of your little videos, lockdown stuff. How did you handle that? Being because I've seen when you're trying to fly back to England and then fly back here, all the different issues,
Yes, yeah. Well, so that's basically the story behind the new album. Yeah, so Sharon and I were due to be married last March last year, and I'd just was finishing a tour with Lifesigns, and we were hearing murmurings about the pandemic, and so our plan was that we'd be on Cruise to the Edge, where I was due to be playing with Lifesigns. So we'd arranged to have a marriage ceremony on the boat with my friend Neil Morse officiating. John Young was going to be the best man. Our head bridesmaid was Joyce Francis, a good friend, wife of Percy Jones, who was with Brand X. Joyce had made these fantastic headdresses for Sharon and the bridesmaids, and then within the space of 2 days, the USA closed its borders to people from the UK. So basically, we were apart for the next 8.5 months, Sharon and I, until it was through a Facebook page called Love Is Not Tourism that we found that had lots of couples from the US and the UK who'd been separated by the pandemic, and it had their stories on there. And some had found a way to travel to the US by going via a third country that wasn't on the exclusion list, as the UK was. So eventually, I managed to get into the US by spending 15 nights in Mexico in October last year, and surviving a direct hit from a Category 2 hurricane on Cancun, which was interesting. My place in the middle of the night, it was like some glass doors, and the seal went, and there's this water. The rain was like horizontal, so I was having to mop out the place for about 2 hours in the middle of the night to stop it from flooding. Anyway, so survived that and got to the USA on the 3rd of November, actually arriving in Washington on election day last year. And eventually we were married on December the 27th last year, just in a small COVID safe environment with just the five of us there, including Sharon's mum. So basically, we were apart for 8.5 months, and I spent the first half of that time working on the Iona box set, and then various other albums for people, Downs Braid Association, Halcyon Hymns, and the Lifesigns Altitude album, both of which are really great. But it also gave me time to write material for To the Faraway. And every day, because particularly in the first half of the pandemic, the UK was locked down, so you were only allowed out for exercise once a day, kind of thing. And I was living on a country lane in the middle of nowhere, a beautiful landscape, and was able to just run and walk and take photos every day of the changing seasons, and the landscape, and think as well about, the as being apart and eventually, hopefully being reunited. So the album really traces the journey. Some of the tracks are inspired by photographs I took, and some tracks are inspired just by the sense of being separated from Sharon. It's kind of a love story, and eventually the lovers are reunited at the end. So I wanted the album to be really positive and have a real sense of hope at the end of it. So that's what I was doing last year, basically recording a lot of the time. So in that sense, apart from the lack of touring, it wasn't that much different to what I normally do day to day, which is lots of recording and stuff. So I think it was kind of easier for creative people in a way who there was like an explosion of people wanting to record albums last year. So I was actually pretty busy.
Yeah, I had a few people that are predicting that next year is going to be like so many releases of people that were creating music, especially in this year alone.
Yes, yeah.
That there's going to be so much out there that it's going to kind of almost be an overload of music. But I think that's better than if there is nothing at all.
Yeah. Well, what I've found is that it's interesting because like the UK government, overnight, basically the whole arts scene in the UK and in many other places just stopped. Theatres closed. There were no tours. So musicians and artists, actors, and everyone involved in the arts, particularly like backstage people, people running PA companies and everything, were all made redundant overnight. And the government was actually suggested that people in the arts, like musicians and dancers, should retrain for other jobs and careers. And I thought that was such a short-sighted thing to do, because in these times where people are desperate, desperate to see loved ones and to desperately wanting to know how to earn a living and everything, that the importance of the arts was more vital than ever. And I found that once we released the Iona box set, I expected it might sell, because it was like $150 to buy or something. I expected it might sell a few hundred copies, maybe. And it sold like 1,100, 1,200. We had to have it repressed because we only made 600 initially.
Right.
But that reinforced for me that the fact that people, when they come to hard times, it's music is what we look for inspiration and solace and hope in. So it's what we do as artists is vital, and the government failed to completely to understand this, sadly.
They only look from a very small viewpoint. They don't really, they don't look at it from the everyman, the every woman, that day-to-day things.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, for hard times, even not in a pandemic, someone that goes through something, whether it's mental or physical hardship. Music, at least for me, I know music has really been like a place of, solace in a way.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I always kind of say it's like music for me is my religion, and in a way like a drug. it keeps me vital, especially when I go back to listen to something that I listened to as a teen,
Yeah.
or my early 20s, something that, one of the first things that really gelled with me, an album, and the very first, for me, the very first album that really gelled with me in 1980 was Rush. It just, I just turned 14, and it was released like January of that year. So a friend of mine bought it for me. Up until that time, I would just listen to whatever was on the FM radio, the top 40 stuff. I didn't. It's sad to say that me in 2021, almost 2022, I care more about music now than I did when in 1980. Back then, it didn't really matter. I mean, I listened to some of the more, the popular bands of the day, but I never went to concerts. I never, never bought certain albums. I kind of stayed within the top 40. And then when my friend gave me that cassette, it was like the whole world open. And
I mean, we've had incredible letters and messages from people over the years, like to Iona's music, and then more recently my releases. I mean, virtually every day I get some kind of email or message from someone who's bought an album, and it's really touched them in different ways. And hearing all these stories is really incredible. On Iona's third album, there was a song that Joanne, the singer, Joanne Haug, wrote called Beachy Head, which was about a place that we visited. We actually did a TV broadcast from there. And it's a really tall cliff on the south coast of England. And we were filming at the bottom of it. And there were all these kind of rusted hulks of cars. And we thought, that's a bit strange. And we were asking the person who we were with, why are they there? And turned out that at the time, in the early 90s, it was a popular spot for people to commit suicide from by just driving off the cliff. So Joanne wrote a song about this, which really touched a lot of people deeply. And we did a festival not long after that album was released, and a guy came up to us and said he wanted to thank us because he'd heard our album and he heard that song, and basically at the time he was thinking of committing suicide by jumping off Beachy Head, and the song basically stopped him doing that, and it turned his life around. And so literally that song saved his life. And when you hear stories like that, the value of music, it just really brings it home to you. And we've had loads of songs played at people's funerals and weddings, and it's just such a privilege over the years to have that impact, offer the music to have that impact on people's lives. And it's just so precious.
I can only imagine, as a musician, that how you have a little bit of feedback there. How when you get those stories and how it just, you wrote your song, you recorded it, and you put it out for the world, and then when you get something back from it, I can only imagine how, especially if it's an uplifting thing such as that story about the guy that almost committed suicide, that song saved him. I'm a firm believer that music can save people, more than anything else, because it connects with them on such a level.
I had another nice message on Facebook the other day, because obviously heard of the sad, very tragic passing of David Longdon from Big Big Train, singer from that band. I did a couple of gigs with him early last year, and we were shocked when we heard he passed away. But on the Big Big Train Facebook group, just the other day, someone put a picture of my album up and said this had really helped him at this, really, he was distraught by David's death, but listening to my music brought some solace and comfort to him in this really hard time. So that was very humbling and really nice to hear as well.
Yeah, what for me, what hit it home more from his passing is the fact that he's close to my age. So it's like whenever people that are my age, when they have their untimely passing, it's like wait, this is it kind of brings reality into play. It's like how human we really are, and how unfortunately as we get older our bodies are a little more fragile than they were when we were younger. So it's like at this point, it's like you got to cherish every moment. And again, I'll go back to it. Music helps, through the moments. I mean, to have different styles of music, different emotions that you're going through of that day or of that hour, and it's like you can listen to a nice, beautiful acoustic guitar piece that in your peaceful times, and then like you were saying earlier, punk, you have some angst-driven, like not up here, but as you get more into heavily populated areas, with traffic, you're the people in front of you and behind you and the side of you, it's like you want them to get away from, so you have those moments. So it's like music helps in every single aspect of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
So I noticed, I saw you. You were in England touring Lifesigns for a few shows.
We did the first tour since the pre-pandemic. The last live gig I did before the pandemic was with Lifesigns on on March the 15th last year. We were supposed to be doing another festival the week later and then Cruise to the Edge, and those were cancelled. So it was great to be back on the road last month. We had 5 UK dates. Actually, if we were going to do them now, they might not happen because of the Omicron variant. That's,
it's like we're getting bombarded by this thing, and I'm sure most of the prog audience, the fans want to see the bands live, and I think the only responsible thing to do, and you don't want to dive into this territory, is get vaccinated, get your the booster, or so that I think it's the audience responsibility in a way right now more than ever to make sure you, the artist, stay healthy.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was interesting because we did lots of lateral flow tests in rehearsals and in the tour and afterwards, and wore masks. I mean, the thing with the venues we were playing, they were all fairly small club venues, so the audience are like really close. And a couple of, like one venue in Norwich, there's no dressing room, so the dressing room is the toilet for everyone. So there's no escaping being, surrounded by people there. So when we were with people, we were wearing masks, and But I had one guy angrily say, "Why don't you take off the mask?" And so I was trying to explain to him that if one of us got COVID, the whole tour would have to be cancelled because we'd all have to self-isolate for 10 days, which is the rules in the UK. And then I wouldn't have been able to travel to the USA after the tour to be with my wife. So it's a big deal. And, also our merchandise lady, Julie, was interacting with people the whole time. We had a perspex screen for her, and she was wearing masks. But and at the same time, our friends in the band Focus were doing a big UK tour, which I went along to, but they had to cancel the last, I think, 10 days of it because they all got COVID. So, I mean, fortunately, I think they're all okay now. But Udo, the bass player, was feeling pretty rough for a while. So we've all got to work together if people want live music back.
Exactly.
It's the responsibility of us as artists and also the audience just to make it work for everyone. Because we don't want to have to cancel too.
Yeah, even as an audience member, if you just have a sniffle from an allergy, just play it on the safe side, wear the mask, because you're not, again, you're not wearing it for yourself, you're wearing it for others. You don't, just in case, because you never know what it could be, nowadays, especially with that Omicron.
Yeah, and as it turned out, on the first gig we did with Lifesigns, some friends of ours came with a friend of theirs who after the gig tested positive. And so, I mean, I had a very small interaction with him. We didn't find out till later. But fortunately, we were both wearing masks. So, I didn't get the virus. But, things, if he hadn't been wearing a mask, then maybe I would have got it. And then we'd have had to cancel the rest of the tour. So, just being sensible, really.
Yeah, because it's now it's a responsibility factor. It's like, okay, some people might say, "Oh, this is taking the fun out of it," but it's responsible fun.
Yeah,
it's like
we had a Zoom call yesterday with some friends, including a friend who's a big prog fan, but also a doctor. And he was saying, I think the masks are like something like 75 or 80% effective in stopping the spread of molecules when you're close together in an enclosed space, within a couple of meters of someone. So so it is very important. None of us want to have to wear masks, but
no,
we do want to play live. So we've got another tour with Lifesigns, the second half of the UK tour in April, and then hopefully Cruise to the Edge at the beginning of May, COVID allowing. So we'll be taking the same precautions, I think, even then, wearing masks as much as possible and getting vaccinated. Well, we've all been vaccinated and had boosters, but we'll all be taking COVID tests before we go on tour. My friends in the Steve Hackett band and crew, they did a really successful UK tour, and it was able to all go ahead, but they did it like every day. The whole crew were tested, had a lateral flow test, and they had minimal reaction. They didn't have meet and greets. They were able to stay in their bubble and be separate from the audiences, and that's and it paid off because they didn't get any COVID cases. So just taking precautions will hopefully mean that live music can still stick around. So
especially Steve's in mid-70s or
he's I think he's 70.
So I mean, he's vital, but remember, he's an older age that they're a little more susceptible to things, anything. But COVID aside, anything, we can get the cold quicker than most people, and so, we gotta protect the musicians and the artists right now.
Mm.
I think that's an important thing, especially with all the festivals. You got, like you said, the Cruise to the Edge, Ross
Mm.
Fest, and then usually happens in October, that Prague stop.
Yes, yeah.
The and what I've been mentioning to other people is about streaming, the live streaming concerts, stuff like that, because we're at a point now that, because you may have to play to a smaller audience,
Mm.
to be able to live stream the concert so more people can see, and then take into account, let's say you have a gig in London and someone in Australia wants to come see you, but can't afford the plane fare.
Yes, yeah,
Live stream it. I think that's
yeah.
good. A lot of people that I've spoken to have said that seems could be the future.
Yes, that's true. I mean, we that's one of the things that I think helped Sharon and I get through last year is we watched loads and loads of live streamed gigs, and also I was able to do I think about 3 as well, and actually they were very lucrative, because people could give donations during the gig. So it was great to get some income from those, but and also to support others doing gigs. Yeah, it was Progstock did this Progstock Presents program, which I was part of, and we watched several, well, most of their Progstock Presents live streams we watched, and it was great to see live music. But the nice thing was we were able to connect with friends on the chat at the same time in real time, and that really helped us get through the pandemic last year. And yeah, I think that could be certainly a part of future work, when we're not going to be so easily able to different parts of the world.
Yeah, I was lucky to be in, people invite me into to their little, not necessarily live to the general public, but live within, a group of people that most that I wasn't aware of before, and yours included. A lot of the people you had on there, I didn't know half of those people, but then it's so, people you don't know, and then you can become friends with. It's like I never liked the idea of people like, okay, we're only going to keep you a small group of friends, and it's like, because then you miss out. There could be someone out there that you never met before, but then through the Zoom calls, you can go, hey, we got things in common.
Yeah, well, yeah. Last year, Sharon had the idea of doing like a monthly Zoom call, and just inviting lots of people, some like lots of friends, but people we didn't really know either, but might be interested. And we did that every month. We did one yesterday, and that was brilliant. Particularly, we found and still find actually people who are quite isolated for various reasons, and particularly because of the pandemic last year, found it just really good to have like 4 or 5 hours on a Zoom call, just connecting with people. And it was great actually. Lots of networking happened as well. Like my friend, who's a great guitarist, Dave Bronze, whose new album I'm working on. He's also great at video, like technically at video marketing and Facebook marketing and stuff like that. And so we connected him through one of the Zoom calls with Julie, who does the Lifesigns merchandise stuff, and they were able to work together on promoting the Lifesigns Altitude album. And so, yeah, things like that. And then just yesterday, we found that 2 friends who'd never met each other actually live really close together. So they're going to get together socially quite soon. So it's great when things like that happen. And I know one of my friends he was a live sound engineer who had no work at all during the pandemic. He really valued being on the Zoom calls and chatting to our friends, on both sides of the Atlantic and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you were mentioning John Young earlier in Lifesigns. Well, when I got in touch with you, with your first solo album in 2004, I believe it was a couple years earlier, he had sent me a package of his little solo bits, some.
Yeah.
And I think there was a live CD in there too. So it's like, I've been aware of him, and we're trying to get together to do something like this with him, and I think, Paul, now that the world is opening up, opportunities are for me less and less to grab people, because now not only are they back busy with recording, they're now rehearsing for live shows, whether it's a full-blown tour or if it's just a few dates, here and there, they're still rehearsing. So they, the time to, getting back to the pre-COVID, where it's like, to grab someone, to interview is
yes, I know you first asked me about doing this a couple of months ago, and I think it was right in the time when I had my first gigs post-pandemic in the summer with Sally Mania as a duo we do, and then there was the first Straubs gig for like 2.5 years in September, and then the Lifesigns tour in November. So suddenly I had like 3 live sets, which I hadn't played for like 2 years.
Right. Yeah. Got to jump on that,
Yeah, as well as finish my album. So it was like panic stations for about 2 months, just trying to get everything done and practice at the same time. But
right.
yeah. So
Well,
apologies for not being available.
Oh no, that's no problem. It's like I'm glad we finally did get to connect in this way, and to get some information out to people, a few people in the chat room, said it's a lot of interesting and insightful information. So that's my goal, is not so much to be a traditional interview, the Q&A, where just 2 friends talking, and go to various subjects, but staying within music and their music, your music. It's like I do look forward to, I'm going to get after the first of the year, I'm going to grab a copy of the solo albums. It can be amongst, right around here.
Yeah, right.
That's where in the bees.
Yes, yeah. No, well, I think I mean, I really value people like you, Ron, who do reviews of the albums, because it's it's an essential way of and doing interviews. It's an essential way of letting people know now, especially because there isn't like a big marketing machine that we have behind us. We're doing this basically ourselves. So yeah, I mean, if you get a nice quote from a review or anything, it's really valuable, and it takes time to listen to albums. And I know a lot of reviewers do this just in their spare time. They've got like a day job and they're doing this just for the love of the music. So it is very much appreciated.
Oh, well,
definitely.
I appreciate the music you've done over the years, and the impact you've had on your fans, that the various things, from the guys you saved his life, and then others that you inspired on, weddings, and then, that you use for remembrance at funerals. It's like,
Yeah.
some people might call that morbid, but to me, it's like you pick a song that people that can remember, because one thing to look at pictures of people that pass, but then if you can relate them with some music, then it's like it helps in a way,
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
especially if you have something that really, touches home, that,
Yeah.
you know,
I remember not long after Iona's Journey into the Morn came out, there was a lovely girl who went to the church I went to at the time, and she was a really lovely, bubbly person. She was only 17, and she came to see us, the band, play live a few times, and loved our music. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, died. She had a brain hemorrhage and died, and her family were distraught, and her boyfriend as well, who I knew. I was at the funeral, but her parents played 2 Iona songs at the funeral, and it was just so moving. They're both songs kind of about, one's Beyond These Shores, and the other was Journey into the Morn. So they're both kind of relating to like a journey from this life to the next, in a way.
right.
And it really made the whole service so moving I think, and meaningful to people, to have that music as part of the. I mean, it was a very somber, sad occasion, but the music definitely helped people through it, I think, and that was a real honor to be there and experience that. So, but yeah, at other times as well. I've played at a few weddings of people I've known, playing some of the more up-tempo, joyous Iona songs as the bride and groom have come into the church, and that's been quite fun to do. And Sally and I did I think a couple of years ago, played at a wedding. We did a whole. The people who were married actually were really big Iona fans, and asked if we could do like a little set in their wedding, which we did, about 20 minutes of Iona songs. So that was quite good fun.
Yeah, you're as kind of in a way part of their journey.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible how certain songs really resonate with people at different times in their lives, and also now they can look back on their wedding and remember those songs as being part of it, and whenever they hear them, which is very nice.
It's amazing that, like I said, I can only imagine how you as a musician feel when music impacts others, because obviously how, you created the song, so what it feels to you, what it means to yourself, but then when others listen to it, they'll have maybe a slightly different meaning to it, and to find out, it's like, maybe it's something you didn't even think about when you were writing the song, or that could have meant something.
Yeah, but I think it's a universal thing, because there's loads of songs from other artists that have the same kind of impact on me, and take you back to a certain point in your time, or they're special because of a relationship you have, and that kind of thing. So it kind of works both ways, and it's nice to be able to contribute back as other artists have contributed to my life in that way.
And like I said earlier, I got music for different moods and emotions, situations, through a lot of the rougher recent times for myself, health wise. It's actually, there's been a lot of different music that's actually helped me heal. So it's like, when I mentioned to some of the, if I know them, I mentioned to the bands or the artists about that, it's like to get that kind of a feedback, it's got to be something, that you can't even describe, it's like, but all, everything that I listen to, it has different meanings, whether it's the same meaning that the artist portrayed or something completely different. It just maybe just the mood of the music itself, because I think in a way sometimes instrumental music is its own voice.
Yes.
It tells you its story that, you can tell when there's the ups and the downs, the triumphs and the defeats, you can hear that in music.
Yes. There's one track on my new album called Cathedral Thinkers, and the idea behind that was I was struck by an article I read on the BBC News website, and I saw this term Cathedral Thinkers, and it referred to people who kind of have a vision for something beyond their own lifetimes, and so it was referring to people who built, like in England, there's these incredible Gothic cathedrals, which you might have seen, built between kind of 11th century and about the 14th century. Amazing buildings. But most of them took like maybe 2 or 3 lifetimes to finish. So the stonemasons built, who first started work on these, never actually saw the fulfillment of their work and finished building. So yeah, I was really struck with that, and also a quote from a film that I saw called Victoria and Abdul, which was about Queen Victoria and this relationship she had with this Indian guy who was kind of her advisor. And she was talking to him in one scene about the Medici family in Italy, who invested in the arts because they wanted to create something astonishing for future generations. And this whole idea of creating art that's going to have a lifetime that's beyond your own, that whole way of thinking, I think is very significant for us now, because with things like climate change, we need to have this this cathedral thinking, that we're thinking not just like the short term of a political party that's in power for 5 years, but we have to find ways of tackling the Earth's problems that are looking beyond the span of our own life to find solutions. But also it applies to music as well. I think if we can, some of the composers, the classical composers like Bach and, well, Baroque composer Bach and Beethoven and all those composers, I'm sure never envisaged that hundreds of years later their music would still be played and valued and be touching people.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's the same, when I think that some of the albums I loved are now, when I was growing up, are now 50 or more years old, but the music is still as popular as ever and touching people.
Exactly.
Yeah, I went to the Seconds Out tour with Steve Hackett in September, and um, just the impact of that early Genesis music being played is so powerful, um, and resonates because we had a deep connection with it. I think that me and the rest of the audience as we were growing up as teenagers. So yeah, so I wrote a track that kind of was about that idea of cathedral thinking, which is an instrumental track. So
Right.
yeah.
That's the amazing thing is you can how, 50 years is like just a like a little what do you call it? A grain of sand in the whole.
Yeah, a drop in the ocean. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like so, but imagine, after we're long gone, music that we grew up with is, hoping, crossing our fingers, people are going to have the same reaction to it that we had when we first heard, some music that we heard when it was originally recorded, that we were or stuff that later on that we discovered,
Mm.
because there's plenty of music that I've discovered that I didn't really listen to as it was first released. Majority of the stuff from the 60s and 70s and part of the 80s, that was, again, I didn't really get into music until I want to say between 80 and 83. That's when I started getting into it. And of course, back then there wasn't the term progressive rock wasn't really around. I mean, I don't think that got coined to maybe the late 80s, early 90s, as a way to categorize the music. But, I remember getting the Yes. You remember the classic Yes, that little compilation? I got that. I'm going, oh, this is really different. It's kind of cool. And then the first ELP album, and I go, wow. I was just floored with these things. So it's like I can remember getting those albums and not knowing that they were progressive rock, and then later on finding out that they were part of this genre that I enjoy.
Yeah, yeah. That was the amazing thing I thought about. I mean, looking back now on that period I suppose from about late 60s to maybe, well, when kind of punk started in about 76, 77, there was so many bands doing really original stuff. And even though like technology was really basic in those days as far as keyboards and guitar sounds and everything, there were so many bands that had like a really distinct individual identity at the time. I mean, if you think of like say Mahavishnu Orchestra with their influences from Indian music, and maybe Wishbone Ash with the twin guitars, and
right.
I mean, just we've got all these bands who are now categorized under progressive rock, but each one was so distinctive, and I think it's actually probably harder now to be distinctive as a composer and a musician, because sometimes limitations actually force you to be creative. I've got one or two people who've asked me about keyboard sounds and things like that. And basically, with like sample libraries now and the keyboards, you can basically get any sound imaginable. But that actually creates a problem because where do you start? So yeah, it's very important to have a focused vision of what you want to achieve as a musician, and then kind of put constraints on that in a way so that you are able to
Also,
actually.
I
know so
think
many musicians who write music but never finish it because first of all, they don't have a time constraint, and secondly, there's so many sounds available, they just get overwhelmed by what sounds to use. But in that period, there was a real spontaneous creativity, and yeah, hasn't been seen, I don't think, in the same way since. Although now there are obviously great bands and musicians. But
Yeah, you know, you got nowadays you can either emulate what came before you, or you can create something new. And it's like I've noticed it's like there's a lot of bands that kind of just stick with a sound that, you know, not the technology side, but just the overall how to compose a song. They stop, you know, they use 1970 something as that's where we're going to focus our music on, instead of taking it to the next, you know, the next logical step of how music can evolve. And that's why a lot of the more modern bands, in a way, they do that, because they're, you know, yes, they're, you know, paying their dues to the people that came before them, but then they're also remembering that they were creating something very original at that time in the late 60s, early 70s. And now it's up to musicians now to create, especially younger ones, you know, don't rest on your heroes' laurels, you know, go out there and make your own, you know, close to the edge or something like that. You know, make something that when you look back at it and say, that's mine, I created from scratch. You know, I didn't try to sound like my heroes. I just, you know, because I don't think any of the bands from this, you know, especially the bands from the 70s, I don't think they sounded like anything in before.
yeah, I mean, well, I think, yeah, I mean, I think all musicians and composers kind of draw on the best bits of what's been before, but then create something original from that. And I think that was interesting. I just finished reading Steve Hackett's autobiography, which is a really good read. I definitely recommend it. Genesis in My Bed, it's called. But he grew up in the 1950s in London, like post-war. So it was a very kind of grey time in a way. I mean, there was a lot of pollution in London in the 50s. A lot of people died because there were a lot of coal fires and these smogs. And but when it got to that kind of towards the end of the 70s, it was almost like everything went from black and white into color. And we just watched the Get Back, the Beatles documentary, Peter Jackson, and suddenly you can see all these amazing. Everyone was wearing fantastic colors, just really bright clothes and creative clothes, whereas previous to that, it was kind of all drab. And there was this explosion of creativity as people kind of got past the post-war years and wanted to be a generation that were not kind of in the same, well, they didn't want to be like their parents who were kind of not able to really pursue creative ways of living. I think after the war, it was just kind of more survival. I was just looking at some publicity photos of a band the other day, a progressive band, and thinking they were all dressed in black and grey. And I'm thinking, you know, maybe it's time, you know, post-pandemic, to have like another explosion of color and creativity like we had in the 60s, because there's the musicians there to do it. It just needs more creative thinking, and there are people who are producing great stuff, but maybe it could be a movement again somehow.
That would be nice, especially, you know, to uplift people's spirits, you know, because you know, in a way, if you want to look at it, the pandemic was, or, you know, enemy. Yeah. Our enemy was some invisible. It was an invisible enemy, and it, you know, I mean, United States alone, over 800,000 people.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think in the whole world, millions. And it's like, and I don't see it. Unfortunately, I don't see the numbers slowing down. I mean, because we've got a lot of these. I'll say it, and I'll probably get people commenting, but a lot of irresponsible human beings out there that irresponsible and selfish, that they only care about themselves. Don't want to make sure that the community, I think I heard a long time ago, we're all on this rock together. It's like, it's like, wouldn't it be nice if we could all just be friendly to each other, or at least civil?
Yeah.
I tell people, you don't have to be my friend, but be civil. It's like, and
Yeah, interesting. I think there's kind of two ways you can react, really. It's the people who have kind of seen it as an assault on their freedom, and so kind of rebel against any kind of impositions. But for me, I think this is it's been a great opportunity to express compassion towards people, in any way we can. Like the Zoom calls that we do, just to get people together and
exactly.
have a community. And so that for me is what Sharon and I have been kind of the way we've reacted to this. Really, which I think is the only good way to react is to see what we can do to help people.
Yeah, even if it's a small amount of people to help, getting people together like this, even, I think that's what the pandemic in a way gave us, is this Zoom technology to be in touch with people that, honestly, the likelihood of ever meeting in person is, very slim, but at least you're able to, to talk to someone, whether it's hundreds or thousands of miles away, almost instantaneously. I mean, like I said, I'm up here in Maine, and nothing happened. Nothing happens here. It's like, I love it here. The scenery is fantastic here. I like the fact that the population is a lot less than Southern California. After 42 years of being in that madness, this is like, I guess someone could equate it to like a retirement. It's like, I'm so relaxed here. I'm so at ease, but no prog bands come up here. I think it's because of the population, because the most population is Portland, and as you go north, it goes from 100,000s down to 50,000s, and then when you get to the way tip, I think you may count villages maybe under 1,000 people. So it's like,
yeah,
I understand economically it may not be a good destination point, but Portland's not that bad. I mean, big bands, big name bands go down there, so it's like, I guess it's to find the right venue for the band. And
yeah,
I mean, up here in Bangor, on the river, we have a waterfront, an open air amphitheater. But mostly plays country music, hip hop, a little bit of hip hop, and a lot of those greatest hits bands that may have not put out an album in decades, and they're just playing their hits,
Yeah.
like Cheap Trick or Heart, bands like that. I mean,
It's certainly harder to get as a band playing original music to get gigs these days.
it
I mean, you look at theatres, the list of artists. There's a theatre in a town not far from where I'm based in the UK, and the Steve Hackett played there, so that's where I went to see him. But you look at the rest of the list of the artists that are on, and they're all tribute bands. Like 90% are tribute bands. Whereas
right.
back in the 70s, it would be reversed. It would be 90% original bands, and maybe one or two kind of older acts. So it is more difficult, but I think there is an audience still there. And with Lifesigns, John Young and I have been talking about how to make it possible for us to do a US tour at some point later next year, hopefully. And we think that our fan base is kind of strong and dedicated enough to probably help us crowdfund the basic costs of that. It is expensive, but once we can actually get over here, once we've paid for visas and travel costs and some accommodation costs, then I think we'd be able to do a reasonably comprehensive tour, certainly on the East Coast, and hopefully get up to your neck of the woods as well.
The only, like we said earlier, the other alternative too to reach more of your fan base that can't travel to locations is doing streaming. And then whereas let's say on your tour you reach hundreds of people, with the added streaming you're going to reach thousands, and people that may have just heard one or two of your songs, curious about seeing you live, but money reasons, financial, to get over to see you, that may not be in their book, but pay for an online concert ticket, the same cost that it'll, in the door, right there, especially nowadays with people that have something like an upwards of 80-inch screen TVs. It's like you're going to be, and of course, if you have that size of a TV, you're going to have, an amazing sound system that, it's can almost rival a live setting and, being at home. Yeah. And you don't have to worry about someone in the front, holding up their camera right in front of your face. It's like, that's the other thing. I don't get people, I want to film this thing. It's like, if you're especially in our age group, remember 20 years ago, we didn't have those things, technology. We were actually enjoying the concert as it's unfolding. And, hopefully maybe the band will put it out on a DVD and then now Blu-ray, but remember, and it's like, that's why whenever I see bands that are mentioning their little tours, especially, I think they call them legacy bands, the ones that came up in the 70s. I always kind of mention in there, I said, it'd be kind of nice if on one of these things you record it. People can't get, especially if you're only going to do like one city tour, it's like record it so others can enjoy it.
Yeah. I have to I'll mention this to John Young and see if we can do a live stream from on the next UK tour, because that might be a nice thing to do.
I'm sure you'll reach more of the fan base than you've ever reached before, and
so certainly with Brexit, it's become really complicated for us to tour in Europe, on mainland in European Union countries. now because of all the added costs and red tape. So yeah, there's something to be said for doing some streaming concerts that could reach people in Europe that we can't get to play.
Yeah, in America, Australia, Japan, places like that,
Yeah,
South America,
yeah.
and
I'd say on the I did I think 3 stream concerts during the pandemic, just solo things, and I think the average amount of people that were watching was kind of about 100 to 150, 160, which actually is pretty good because to get that amount of people for a solo gig would actually be quite good. So it's definitely something to think about there. Looks
yeah,
like it's getting dark here now.
it's getting dark there. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time out, to talk with me and talking about your music. I mean, it's always a pleasure to talk to musicians. Get that insight that you normally don't get from magazine articles. Is usually, at least here, I like it where the guest is doing the narrative rather than me, and in magazine articles, it's usually the interviewer. He's steering you the way you want to go. And I, first of all, I don't know how to do that. And second of all, I want the musician to tell the story, not me.
Yeah, yeah.
And I really do appreciate you taking the time out.
No, it's a pleasure. Yeah, but maybe I can mention where people can get my new album from.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So actually we brought it out in 5 formats, called To the Faraway, and there was only a limited edition of the photo book box set, of which the book was part of. That's my wife Sharon.
Yes.
And I think there's only 6 of those left, so I'm not sure if Gonzo are going to actually make any more of those. I hope they can if we get enough kind of pre-orders again, but they may not. So only a few of those left. But then there's like the basic. I was going to say cassette for some reason. Basic CD version. Then there's a double CD version, which has got a bonus disc of another hour's worth of material, some of which are like the demos that became the album, and then there's some tracks I recorded especially as exclusive tracks. And what else is on there? Yeah, that's basically it. Some tracks or ideas that I've not released yet that may blossom into longer tracks on the next album. And then there's a signed version of the 2 CD thing, and then there's the 24-bit WAV download version as well. But what we're doing is, at the moment, anyone who buys any of the physical copies gets the download version as well, free. So that's available from the Open Sky Records store, and the address is www.musicglue.com/Iona. That's IONA. We'll probably put it in the comments somewhere as well.
Oh,
but yeah, the advantage of buying from there is that more money comes to the artist, because that's our own store that Gonzo Multimedia and myself run. So yeah, and all my other albums and all the Iona albums, including the Book of Iona box set, which there are only a few copies of that left now. All of that's available on there as well.
Yeah, so get on over there. And Sharon said you can buy mugs and T-shirts there too.
Oh yes, that's right. Yes, yeah. Oh, the mugs are great actually. There's various different mug. I think there's about 7 different designs, and yeah, they came out really great actually. So yeah, check those out. There's a few t-shirt things on there as well. So yeah, we're still working on getting some different t-shirt designs. So yeah, but I've got one of there's some Iona hoodies on there which are absolutely brilliant, and I wear mine virtually ceaselessly because it's such a good quality hoodie. That's the Iona 30th anniversary ones.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Looks comfortable.
Yeah, in fact, I've worn mine so much it's in serious need of washing. Yeah.
Well,
But it all helps me. Because it's basically it's through selling stuff through the store is how I can make a living to fund the next recording, which is obviously I want to do. So yeah,
I think that's the best way is to buy direct from the band, whenever possible. I mean, some instances that I've noticed where shipping kind of comes into play, but
yeah,
if if you're getting it directly from the band, it's like they're getting 100% of the profit, pretty much, and then that other thing, Bandcamp, which is a pretty cool idea. Whoever devised that, it's like, especially on the first Friday of every month, the band gets all of the profit. So it's like,
yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah. I mean, Bandcamp charge quite a big percentage generally, but on that day it's free, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like it's perfect. That's the next. Again, if you can't buy it from the band itself, if they have a Bandcamp page, that's the next best thing. And then
definitely better than going via Amazon or somewhere, because first of all, often you're paying more on Amazon for the actual physical CD, and also the profits that come back to the band or artist are much less.
Right.
Yeah, I should mention the Lifesigns website as well, which I think is lifesigns.co.uk. But just check, if you just Google Lifesigns band, because the Lifesigns similarly have their own store. We have our own store where you can buy the new album Altitude, which is really great, and all the other stuff that the band have released.
So I'll put all those links down below, and when I put this up on YouTube, so people can go to it and explore and buy.
Excellent.
And so again, thank you very much, Dave. Really do appreciate you taking the time.
Excellent. Okay. Cheers, Ron.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.